Honorable Rais al-Hukuma, Brother Abdullah bin Karan, President of the University, Mr. Saeed Amzazi, President of the Jury, Professor Lazmori, distinguished guests, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. A traveler from a distant land in Mashriqul Aqsa comes to Maghribul Aqsa and marvels at his good fortune. His sense of history quickly reminds him that centuries earlier, a great name from this land had traveled to India and recorded in some detail his impressions about the governance, manners, and customs of Indians. He attained high office and also had his share of minor misfortunes. I refer, of course, to Sheikh Abdullah Mohammed bin Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Lawati, better known as Ibn Battuta of Tanja. I thank the government of the Kingdom of Morocco and His Excellency the President of the University for inviting me to address the Muhammad Khamis University today. Even in distant India, the contribution of Moroccan intellectuals to modern thought and challenges is known and acknowledged. Names like Abdullah al-Arawi and Abid al-Jabri readily come to mind. So do contributions of feminist writers like the late Fatima Marnisi and Fatima Sadiqi. The challenge in each case was that of modernity and the contemporary responses to it. Each addressed a specific aspect of the problem. The general question was posed aptly by Al-Jabri, and I quote him: how can contemporary Arab thought retrieve and absorb the most rational and critical dimensions of its traditions and employ them in the same rationalist direction as before, the direction of fighting feudalism, Gnosticism, and dependency? End of quote. This is the rich field, amply and productively explored by contemporary thinkers in Arab lands. This included the debates on Arabism, nationalism, democracy, and Islam. Much has also been written about the trauma, self or externally inflicted, experienced individually and collectively by Arab societies in the past 7 decades. The misfortunes visited on Arab lands since the 19th century was in good measure a result of their proximity to Europe in the age of imperialism. I would like to pause here, ladies and gentlemen, and take up a related matter to draw attention of the audience to some terminological questions. In current discussions in many places, the term Arab and Islam are used together or interchangeably. But are the two synonymous? Is Arab thought synonymous with Islamic thought? Is all Arab thought Islamic or vice versa? Above all, can all Islamic thinking be attributed to Arabs? I raise these questions because for a variety of reasons and motivations, the contemporary world, particularly the West, tends to create the impression of a powerful, irrational force that, from Morocco to Indonesia, moves whole societies into cultural assertiveness, political intransigence, and economic influence. The underlying basis for this, as Aziz Al-Azmi put it, are presumptions of Muslim cultural homogeneity and continuity that do not correspond to social reality. Allow me to amplify. Islam is a global faith, and its adherents are in all parts of the world. The history of Islam as a faith and of Muslims as its adherents is rich and diversified. In different ages and in different regions, the Muslim contribution to civilization has been noteworthy. In cultural terms, the history of Islam is the history of a dialogue between the realm of religious symbols and the world of everyday reality, a history of the interaction between Islamic values and the historical experience of Muslim people that shaped the formation of a number of different but interrelated Muslim societies. This audience is in no need of being reminded of the truism that reasoning should proceed from facts to conclusions and should eschew a priori pronouncements. What then are facts? The Wikipedia indicates the world's Muslim population in the year 2015 as 1.7 billion. The Pew Research Center of the United States has published country-wise and region-wise religious composition and projections for 198 countries for the period 2010-2050. It indicates that in the year 2010, Muslims numbered 1.59 billion, out of which 986 million were in Asia Pacific. It projects that 4 years from now, that is in the year 2020, the corresponding figures would be 1.9 billion, out of which 1.13 billion, or about 60%, would be in Asia Pacific. The comparative figures for West Asia and North Africa would be 317 and 381 million, or 19.9 to 20.52%, and for Sub-Saharan Africa, 248 and 329 million, amounting to 15.59 and 17.31% respectively. Within the Asia-Pacific region, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, and Turkey would together account for 830 million in the year 2010 and 954 million in the year 2020. These numbers underline the fact that an overwhelming number of Muslims of the world are non-Arabs and live in societies that are not Arab. Equally relevant is the historical fact that they contributed to and benefited from the culture of Islam in full measure. This trend continues to this day. The one conclusion that I draw from this is that in ascertaining Islamic and Muslim perceptions on contemporary happenings, the experiences and trends of the thinking of non-Arab segments of large Muslim populations in the world assume an importance that cannot be ignored. These Segments include countries with Muslim majorities, principally Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey, as also those where followers of Islamic faith do not constitute a majority of the population, like India, China, and the Philippines. Amongst both categories, India is sui generis. India counts amongst its citizens the second largest Muslim population in the world. It numbers 180 million and accounts for 14.2% of the country's total population of 1.3 billion. Furthermore, religious minorities as a whole, and that includes Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, and Parsis or Zoroastrians, constitute 19.4% of the population of India. Friends, India's interaction with Islam and Muslims began early and bears the imprint of history. Indian Muslims have lived in India's religiously plural society for over 1,000 years, at times as rulers, at others as subjects, and now as citizens. They are not homogeneous in racial or linguistic terms and bear the impact of local cultural surroundings in manners and customs in varying degrees. Through extensive trading ties before the advent of Islam, India was a known land to the people of the Arabian Peninsula, the Persian Gulf, Western Asia, and was sought after for its prosperity and trading skills and respected for its attainments in different branches of knowledge. Thus, Baghdad became the bearer, the dispenser, and the seeker of Indian numerals and sciences. The Panchatantra was translated and became Kalila wa Dimna. Long before the advent of Muslim conquerors, the works of Al-Jahiz, Ibn Khurdadbeh, Al-Khindi, Yaqubi, and Al-Mas'udi testify to it in ample measure. Al-Biruni, who studied India and Indians more thoroughly than most, produced a virtual encyclopedia on religion, rituals, manners and customs, philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. He commenced his great work by highlighting the differences, but was careful enough to relate, not criticize. Over centuries of intermingling and interaction, an Indo-Islamic culture developed in India. Many years back, an eminent Indian historian summed it up in a classic passage, and I quote to you, "It is hardly possible to exaggerate the extent of Muslim influence over Indian life in all departments, but nowhere else is it shown so vividly and so picturesquely as in customs, in intimate details of domestic life, in music, in the fashion of dress, in the ways of cooking, in the ceremonial of marriage, in the celebration of festivals and fairs, and in the country's institutions and etiquette." End of quote. Belief, consciousness, and practice became a particularly rich area of interaction. Within the Muslim segment of the populace, there was a running tussle between the advocates of orthodoxy and those who felt that living in a non-homogeneous social milieu, the pious could communicate values through personal practice. In this manner, the values of faith though not its theological content, reached a wider circle of the people. This accounted for the reach and popularity of different Sufi personalities in different periods of history, and justifies an eminent scholar's observation that Sufism took Islam to the masses, and in doing so, it took over the enormous and delicate responsibility of dealing at a personal level with a baffling variety of problems. It also produced a convergence or parallelism. The Sufi trends sought commonalities in spiritual thinking, and some Islamic precepts and many Muslim practices seeped into the interstices of the Indian society and have exercised and gave expression to a broader and deeper unity of minds expressive of the Indian spiritual tradition. The cultural interaction was mutually beneficial, and an Islamic scholar of our times, and I refer to Sheikh Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, has acknowledged, and I quote him, an incontrovertible fact that Muslims have benefited immensely from the ancient cultural heritage of India. End of quote. I mention this because I am aware, but dimly, about the role of Sufi movements and zawiyas in the history of Morocco. There is, in my view, room for comparative studies of Sufi practices in Morocco and India. It is in this backdrop, a backdrop that has impacted on modern India and its existential reality of a plural society on the basis of which a democratic polity and a secular state structure was put in place. The framers of our Constitution had the objective of securing civic, political, economic, social, and cultural rights as essential ingredients of citizenship. Particular emphasis was placed on rights of religious minorities. Thus, in the section on fundamental rights, all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion. In addition, every religious denomination shall have the right to establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purposes, to manage its own affairs in matters of religion, and to acquire and administer movable and immovable property. Furthermore, all religious or linguistic minorities shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. A separate section in the Constitution on fundamental duties of citizens enjoins every citizen to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, and regional or sectional diversities, and also to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. Given the segmented nature of our society and unequal economy, the question of substantive equality and justice remains work in progress, and concerns have been expressed from time to time about its shortfalls and pace of implementation. The corrective lies in our functioning democracy, its accountability mechanisms, including regularity of elections at all levels, from village and district councils to regional and national levels, to the rule of law, and to heightened levels of public awareness of public issues. The one incontrovertible fact about the Muslim experience in modern India is that its citizens professing the Islamic faith are citizens, consider themselves as such, are beneficiaries of the rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution, participate fully in the civic processes of the polity, and seek correctives for their grievances within the system. There is no inclination in their ranks to resort to ideologies and practices of violence. The same diversity of historical experience and the perceptions emanating from it is to be found in Indonesia, that has the world's largest population of Muslims and where two Islamist parties, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, function legally, have large memberships, and participate in political activities, including local and national elections. On a visit to Jakarta a few months back, I had the occasion to solicit their views on contemporary debates on political Islam. They said Islam in Indonesia has united with the culture of the people, and their Islamic traditions have adapted themselves to local conditions. They felt Muslims are moderate in their outlook, that Islam does not advocate extremism, and that radicalization of Islam is harmful and does not benefit the community. Both instances cited above indicate that in countries having complex societal makeup, the accommodation of diversity in political structures and socio-economic policies is not an option but an imperative necessity, ignoring which can have unpleasant consequences. I come back to the principal theme of this talk. Why is the Indian model of relevance to our globalizing world? Globalization has many facets: economic, political, and cultural. All necessitate the emergence of a set of norms, values, and practices that are universally accepted. A sociologist has defined it as the compression of the world and the intensification of consciousness of the world as a whole. An obvious implication of this would be assimilation and homogenization. In a world of intrinsically diverse societies at different levels of development, this could only result in denial of their diversity and imposition of uniformity. Such an approach can only result in conflict. The challenge for the modern world is to accept diversity as an existential reality and to configure attitudes and methodologies for dealing with it. In developing such an approach, the traditional virtue of tolerance is desirable but insufficient. Our effort, thinking, and practices have to look beyond it and seek acceptance of diversity and adopt it as a civic virtue. We in India are attempting it. It cannot yet be said that we have succeeded, but are committed to continuing it. we invite all right-minded people to join us in this endeavor. I thank you.